Hi, everybody, and welcome to the session today, Assessment in Action, also Gen Ed evaluation training. So really today's discussion is going to be a lot about our assessment evaluation that we did in the spring semester and some of the details of what's to come this academic year. And really a dive into kind of the process that we use here at Triton for evaluation and some opportunities for us just to discuss ways that we can improve teaching and learning in the classroom. So for you that don't know me, my name is Krysti Reece. I am the DMS program chair, but I'm also the chair of the assessment committee here on campus. I'm going into my second year now in that role, and definitely I'm very excited to talk to you guys today about Gen Ed assessment, as I am one of the leaders of that subcommittee in addition to the leader of the committee itself. So I want to take a minute, and I know I presented this at workshop, but I think it's so important that we talk about what is assessment, what does it mean, what does it look like at its many different levels across campus. So we can use the chat feature, the raise of hands, whatever you'd like. Just kind of give me what you think assessment means to you. Don't I'll jump in at once either.
Well, I'll jump in.
All right.
You know, when I think of assessment, just in a very general now kind of frame, it's building systems and processes and interactions and learning moments with kind of a critical lens built in so that there's awareness of expectations and outcomes, and at the same time that awareness is there, the practice is occurring. So I guess, you know, what I'm really describing is a very kind of fluid awareness of you know, measuring and perceiving the quality of outcomes.
I think that's great. So definitely heard systematic, very transparent, established learning outcomes, evaluation. I saw a few comments there in the chat, evaluation of learning. And that's definitely what we think of. So I'm just going to click here. This is our Triton definition according to our handbook for the committee. So assessment is a systematic collection, review, and use of information about educational programs undertaken for the purpose of improving student learning and development. So at the workshop, I did talk about probably us needing to expand this as an institution and as faculty, because it's beyond just a program, right? We assess in the classroom, we assess general education outcomes for all of our students as graduates from here and also from our programs. So it happens at a variety of levels, and we'll talk about that. But really, some of the things that you brought up, Gren, are great, right? The transparency, having those clear outcomes are important and crucial to our assessment process. So just wanted to share at least our current definition as is, which is.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
When that if you know, or anybody knows, when that definition was adopted, do you remember the conversation about including the word improving in the basic definition of assessment?
So this was established prior to my role as chair in the handbook. And I believe it was updated in 2018, but I don't know the context of that discussion or that kind of.
All right. It's just that, you know, from my point of view, improvement is not an organic part of assessment. It's something that can happen. Assessment is a tool for that. But, right. You know.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk to about the assessment cycle and things like that. So I absolutely open and welcome. So part of this too is me going to pitch to everybody, please come to the committee meetings. These are things that we talk about and changes that we're going to be making. So definitely with that kind of in mind. Now, it's important, again, I know I referenced the levels of academic assessment that occur here on campus, and I'm focusing on academic assessment because it's really my wheelhouse. But again, assessment occurs all over and across campus outside of the academic realm as well. So we have our general education outcomes that we have established. We'll talk in great detail about those. We also have our program assessment outcomes, and then we have our course outcomes. So those are really, you know, in leveling from top down, the overarching academic assessment outcomes that we evaluate. Now, just to kind of get an idea, and again, you can do it in the chat, what levels of assessment have you been a part of? So I think it's important that, you know, we get an idea of, you know, the room and what your level of participation has been. So I'm just going to put a polling feature in here, and it's going to say level of assessment. And then you can pick which one. So course, program, gen ed is GE, just to keep it easy for us, or more than one, just to get an idea. All right, so there's just a quick poll there. You can click on whichever one you'd like. All right, I guess I have to respond as well. All right, so a majority have been involved in more than one assessment activity here on campus, and really all of us are a part of all of it, right? So if you teach a course and we're evaluating, we're a part of the bigger picture as well, usually a part of a program and definitely a part of a degree. So really, again, our focus today is going to be on gen ed outcomes and their evaluation as we kind of proceed through the next hour or so. There are 5 general education outcomes that are assessed here on campus. So we have critical thinking, communication, information literacy, quantitative literacy, and global learning. And when we look at these different general education outcomes for our students, really what we're saying is, as a result of completing a degree or a program here, our students are able to achieve a certain level of performance in these 5 different areas. Now, we started evaluating these in 2020, was our first evaluation of critical thinking. And over the course of last spring and what will be our evaluation this fall, we've been evaluating communication, because communication does break down into more than just one form. You know, we have our written and our oral communication, so that's what we're working on now. And then information literacy will be our spring semester, and we'll move on to quantitative and global as we move forward. So for those that aren't as familiar, our evaluation of gen ed outcomes as an institution, we are very new to the process, and we're working and developing and strengthening our process as we kind of navigate through. Like I said, our first evaluation was completed in 2020 with critical thinking. So we're getting there, and we're getting better, and our processes are changing. And we'll talk a little bit about that and ways that you could get involved if you would like. So let's focus just for now on our gen ed outcomes that were evaluated in spring of 2021. So this was written communication, and we took a selective representation of those courses that submitted on their course outline that they had a higher level of written communication within their course, and asked for samples or artifacts from faculty. The process of actually collecting these artifacts and picking the courses that are involved is very much so controlled by research. So how we do this is, when we made our curriculum maps a couple of years ago, we said, you know, in this class we have you know, communication. In this class we have information literacy, and we have critical thinking. So those were selected and created by the developers of those curriculum maps, and we use that information to do a random selection and sample of courses that have stated they do that. So in this one, we did send out to 20 courses, and we got feedback and artifacts from 17, which was wonderful. And it was a nice variety of courses across campus. When research does do their random selection, they try and keep the percentages somewhat reflective of the actual students that are in the courses. So, or I'm sorry, the students that are in the different areas. So for this, there was automotive, there was BIS, there was economics, history, humanities, written communication. Rhetoric is going to be heavy, so there were quite a few rhetorics. Ophthalmic and mathematics. So these are the sample that we worked with. Of that, we had 209 artifacts that were evaluated, 211 that were submitted. So kind of just talking about some of the samples that we had of work. When you think of written communication, we often think of essays or long papers and things like that. But the goal was to get a representation of what each specific area felt best demonstrated their students' written communication. So we had a variety of discussion boards, test questions, short answers, and essays to evaluate and reflect on. So that was kind of the sampling process there, and that's the one that we're going to use moving forward as well. We did have 13 evaluators that reviewed all 209 different artifacts that were submitted. So the process is that we get our 209 artifacts or demonstrations, papers, whatever those different pieces of student learning are, and then we evaluate them 2 times by 2 different people. So we had 13 evaluators that met prior to looking at all of these different artifacts, and we did what we call norming. So if you're not familiar with norming, we had specific samples that we each rated and reviewed based on a common rubric, and we discussed our thoughts and our process behind making the assignments for numerical values for that rubric as a collective group. So when I talk about the rubric, we use the AAC and U value rubric, and that's pretty consistent with what the committee plans to use moving forward for all of our evaluations. And for the written communication, we did modify. So I'm going to show you the picture of the AAC and U value rubric, and then I'm going to talk you through some of the ways that we modified it to make it a little bit more digestible and easier for us faculty to use. So with this, I apologize because, of course, when I translated this in over to create my 5 areas of evaluation did not show up very clear. The good news is they're on the next slide, and hopefully they'll be a little more visible, or in the next couple slides. So this was our starting point. And this is the AAC and U value rubric. So this is used by community colleges, universities across the United States, is a way to really evaluate different general education criteria. So this is for written communications. You can see at the top. I'm not going to go over all these gory details here. We will break it down a little bit more in the next couple slides. But the 5 key areas that were addressed were context and purpose for writing, content development, genre and disciplinary convections, sources and evidence, and then control of syntax and mechanics. So those are really our 5 key umbrella areas. And we took this as a committee, talked about what each box really stated, what it meant, and what we felt and how it translated to our institution. And we also talked about the fact that this rubric is meant for colleges, community colleges, as well as universities. So really, we have to keep that in mind as a reference when we talk about things such as capstone and those higher level criteria. So we really keep it under the scope of understanding that we are a community college, we are a 2-year institution, and maybe we're not going to get to 4, and that's okay, because that's not really where we're at in the mix of this rubric. But I thought it would be nice, instead of showing you the wordy AAC and U, value rubric, the one that we came up with as a committee, just to make it a little bit easier for us. So when we talked about the context and purpose of writing, it included the audience purpose and the circumstances around the task. We really just kind of brought it down a notch to minimize what we were seeing and highlight certain areas. So we did add the did not meet criteria because sometimes we realized things just weren't demonstrated as far as a benchmark. For our next one was minimal attention to that context. And then it went up from there. So demonstrating awareness and begins to show awareness. So some of those key terms like that we found helpful to highlight and use. And then as it goes up, you can see that we started to add or just kind of make it very specific as far as adequate consideration for 3 versus thorough understanding. So those are the different types of things within the original rubric that we talked about, what we felt highlighted as 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. We also had content development. So that was our second area of evaluation. And again, we had to add that did not meet category, not demonstrated. And again, really narrowed our focus to benchmark 1 with simple ideas. In sum. So simple and sum is something I had highlighted, and you'll see on the next slide that for that category, I did highlight so that we could use it as reference. Milestone 2 was explores ideas in most of the work. Number 3 was compelling and shapes the whole work. And then 4 was mastery of the subject shaping the whole work. So again, I just kind of, as we progress through this, want you to just think about when you have written communication in your classroom and the assignments that are submitted to you, where do you think your students fall? Where's their strength? Where's their weakness? And I'm going to take weakness back, and I did that at faculty workshop as well. Where is their area for improvement? All right. So genre and disciplinary conventions. So when we see this again, we had a not demonstrated. Basic organization and presentation was our first benchmark. 2 for our milestone was follows expectations, organization, content, and presentation. Our 3 was consistent use of important conventions. And one key thing that kept our theme in that one specifically that kept coming up was the stylistic choice. So adding that stylistic choice. 4 was detailed attention with successful execution and also advanced formatting. So again, we just kind of picked the key terms here that we felt were important. Sources and evidence, so not demonstrated, would be a 0. Attempt to use outside sources, usually without citation. So attempt to use it, but a lot of times there was no citation available or presented. Attempt to use appropriate, credible, or relevant resources. Consistent use of credible and relevant discipline specific. So that was one thing that really differentiated between a 2 and 3 was that discipline specific resources. And then the 4th would be skillful use of high quality, credible, relevant resources. All right. And our final category was control of syntax and mechanics. And again, we had our did not meet our benchmark 1, which was language sometimes impedes the meaning of due to error. 2, which is generally conveys the meaning, and there were some errors. 3 was straightforward with few errors, and then error-free and graceful was 4. So I hate to put you on the spot, Nancy, but you were there and you were a part of the evaluation. So I'm going to can you give us just kind of your input or your insight into how you felt the process of us developing this rubric went?
Yeah, I thought we worked really well together, and it was nice to all of us kind of use that rubric to talk about it, because there's things that I didn't think about, and until talking to others, I realized, oh, okay, I can put this person into this category or whatnot. But I think we did really well as a group, and sharing our ideas on how to rate the students was very helpful.
Right, and I will say too, just one thing it's important to say or to recognize is that we're not judging the assignments that were done. We're not rating the instructor. We're not rating anything like that. We're just looking at the representation of the work and where it would fall on the evaluation. So I know I shared this in faculty workshop again, but where were our strengths at? So context and purpose and content development. So those were our 2 areas of the most strength. And there were some students that did get that 4 that really showed that as a major strength and met that capstone level. The average here was 2.5 to 2 for each of these categories. So when we look at that again and kind of have that thought process of this being used for community college and university, that to us in our conversations really met what we would expect to see from our students at a 2-year institution. So this we consider our students' strengths. Where we felt that students or where we identified that students need areas for improvement would be genre and convections, sources and evidence, syntax, and mechanics. And when we looked at this, there really were a few reasons. So when you think about some of these different areas, especially sources and evidence, that's going to be really hard to demonstrate in a test question, for example. So unfortunately, it didn't meet or it didn't apply, but that does go into the statistics as well. So there is a little bit of that part that is part of the evaluation that may have skewed the final results a little. But other than that, these were the specific areas that we felt for improvement. So what are your thoughts on that? I'm going to go back to our slide of areas for improvement. Do you feel as faculty that this reflects what you see in the classroom? Was there anything that's surprising or that you feel maybe does, is not surprising and you feel it is an accurate reflection? Any thoughts? Very reflective of what you're seeing, Nancy?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah,
not surprising.
I think that the sources and evidence is what students lack the ability that I see to use.
Right. Okay. And I would say too, this was very reflective of what I see in the classroom as well. So the good thing is, these are things that we know are happening, and now that we have the data and the information to kind of back that as well, we can work on improving moving forward. So, or helping our students to improve as we move forward. Farzan, did you have something to add?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was thinking that I feel like in my courses when I teach physics, that when students, I don't have a lot of essay type questions, but communication is part of how students present their solutions. If 2.5 is the overall average, can we see what was the average among students who are actually who are transferring, who are actually going for a professional degree versus students who are more along technician lines? So do we see a significant difference?
So I think that's a great question. We did not disaggregate the data that much, but that would be definitely interesting to see. I can tell you there was like a dual credit course in some high school submissions, and they were impressive. But other than that, I actually we did not disaggregate it that much. I can see if research can though, based on, because everything is assigned to a course. We don't see it at that level per se on our end because we want to keep it as anonymous as possible. But I'm sure that we could work on kind of separating out that data. I think it would be very telling and very interesting to see those results.
And because for some of our students, communication and written communication is a significantly more important tool in their professional lives compared to other students.
Absolutely. Well, and I will say we actually had, and because I'm from health careers, I could understand, and it was nice, and Nancy as well, it was nice for us to be in the room when we were evaluating one of the artifacts that was from a career education area, because it was a sample of patient chart documentation. And in my area, that the way that that's written made sense to me. You couldn't really rate it on the rubric, which made it challenging. We actually ended up not evaluating that one, or those ones, but some of these things are very discipline specific, and what's good and high quality written communication to me in health careers isn't always a paper, right? It's patient chart documentation, and it's reflected in different ways. And that, I think, is the nice part about having multiple perspectives in one room, is we can all give that feedback and that input. Because you're exactly right, Farzan. All right, so I know that I gave some tips as far as improving written communication in the classroom. I'm going to give the same ones that I gave. I'm also going to try and pick your brains a little bit and see if we can come up with some ideas or techniques or things that you feel you've used or have worked. So explain the process of writing. And thank you for coming, Corinne. Explain the process of writing, and that sometimes I think is an area that gets shortchanged a little bit, is we know that writing is not easy for everyone, and not everybody enjoys writing, and really the process of having a rough draft and making those corrections and having a final product, and not just writing the night before, giving it time for revisions. Peer reviewing has been, in multiple different literature that I read, was very, very effective at improving that written communication. So having a second set of eyes that can question and really look for when that syntax is off, and that control to ask for clarification and provide that feedback. And with that comes writing revision opportunities. Stressing the importance of grammar and clarity. So grammar and clarity is actually on my discussion board, all of my discussion board rubrics, just because I think it's important that students understand, even in a discussion board, that's part of their writing, and they shouldn't be typing like they text, is what I always say. But that's just something, one way in the classroom that I reiterate that importance of grammar and clarity. And then offering tools for bibliography and citation resources. So those were just some of the tips that I had. Refworks.com is an example of bibliography and citation resource that I've recommended to students, and it's because I personally used it. So I was able to pitch for it just because it was very helpful for me in my own degree. But those are my tips. So I wanted to hear some of your tips or things that you believe would be helpful for improving written communication for our students. Nancy?
Now, I'm not sure if this would fall in here, but do you think having a rubric and having clear expectations would help improve written communication? Do you think that would fall into this category?
I personally do, and I think mainly as kind of a reviewer, and I think you would agree too, like clear instructions that can help with anything, any area in academics, if you will, written, oral, any assignment or assessment tool that they're given. If there's clear instructions that maybe include these and a rubric being part of it. Personally, I believe, I agree that would definitely be something helpful, or a helpful tool.
Okay, thank you.
Jelena?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. I think, and I'm going to go back to the example because I'm also in the health careers field regarding like nursing documentation and learning how to document. I think potentially just having actual little in-services or sessions for the students so that they do learn that piece of it. Because I think that, you know, I teach the lab sessions, and it's really hard to fit that in because you're trying so hard to get them the skills that they need. But on top of learning how to just write out what you've completed for a patient, there's that aspect of learning how to use the electronic medical records. So there's like, it's kind of twofolded, right? We know that they have to learn how to write it out, but yet how do they actually apply it with the electronic medical record and clicking off a bunch of boxes and then right clicking on there to add a note or a comment. So I think there's, it could get a little complicated there, but I think maybe some like actual in-services hands-on where they're actually just given an example and let's just learn how to write it.
I think that that's great. And I know just health careers here too, and lab perspective as well. There are exercises that I do in the lab where I give them like a tech worksheet and they have to physically write it out for me as they interview their patient and things like that. So yeah, and even those just little activities reinforce that written. Now, again, for our area, I think we abbreviate a lot and we don't write in complete sentences, but that's discipline. That's where I think it becomes challenging to evaluate at the same level as an English 102 paper, right, or essay. So yeah, I think those are great. Any other perspectives, non-health career? Farzan?
So I teach physics to health science students. So nursing students have to take physics as well. So normally I have a rubric. I have like, how do you write a lab report? And then I also upload an example lab report, which is actually an international publication. And I tell them, you don't have to do exactly the same way, but during the length of the course, slowly try to improve the quality of your work. Because this work someday could be a legal document. You know, you're treating a patient, everything that you're writing can have great legal value. It can save you in terms of liability. So if it's a legal professional document, you put it in that context, and that sometimes that helps in changing the attitude of some students towards how they approach that, writing that document.
Right. And it definitely sounds too like you're giving that opportunity for revision, which is, again, one of those definite proven successful ways of improving written communication. So good. All right. So just wanted to add, you know, resources on campus. I'm not sure that everybody has had their department meeting where they've had Dubravka come in, but she was in ours, and I just wanted to give a pitch for, you know, the ability to reserve library rooms and also have librarians help as well with research as well as with these different writing tasks that students have. So there is a lot of resources available within the library. So definitely pitching them. Online research tools. So again, the library has on their website tons of articles that are discipline specific, very, very appropriate and scholarly. So I recommend using those or sending students to use those different resources or seek out the help as to how, because I know that a challenge that I've heard from students in my own classes is that sometimes we all know that Google's easy, but it's not always accurate and it's not always scholarly or relevant. So really using the tools that we have available and accessible here on campus is very helpful. And if the online research tools are challenging, there's the librarians to help. So again, just kind of pitching for those resources and their use on campus. The Academic Success Center, so tutors as well in the different areas. I know, again, in the H building, we have kind of our common area with our specific tutors that are there, but they're across campus. So advocating for students to use those resources. Can anybody think of anything else that maybe I'm missing or did not include on this list? Because I know it's not very lengthy. But any other resources on campus that you'd like to recommend or kind of give a pitch for? All right. I would say that these are our key resources, instructors as well. Francis?
Well, there are students, if they're in Triumph or Surge, they have support services there too. And that would be something to put in there. They have tutors that will help them. So I was just reminded because I got an email today about one of my students, and I can alert them and they'll help them with tutors or writing or whatever they need. So that would be another resource that's there.
Yes, that's great. I will add that to my list also, so that way I have it on here for future. But I did get the same email. So yeah, Triumph for sure, or Trio. All right, so that's really last year's data and information as far as written communication. Coming this year, we have a double study. So we have our work cut out for us as far as the assessment committee goes. We're doing oral communication this fall and information literacy in the spring. So we have a lot kind of coming in as far as figuring out how we're going to work with our oral communication and be able to evaluate those artifacts and get that data together. And then information literacy. Now, one thing that I did want to do, I'll go back, is just kind of go ahead and get an idea of what you guys think would be different artifacts that could be submitted for oral communication. Or what ways in your classroom do you feel oral communication is really represented? Or it could not be represented at all. So presentations of projects, yep, that's really one of the main ones that I have for mine. And I'm gonna just kind of, for health careers, one of the key courses that we do oral communication in, or say we have oral communication in, is clinical. And when we have that, for example, I'm realizing it's very hard to demonstrate that and to bring that forward for evaluation. So that's something for us as a committee and as those that are evaluating and looking at some of these general education outcomes. Oral communication presents its own unique challenge. But definitely presentations, speeches, different research, as you said, Francis, all of those types of things where students can present that oral communication. Now, I will be sharing with everybody, I'm going to have VP Campos send it out, the AAC and U value rubrics, because I think it's important that we see as an entire faculty population, not just those that are evaluating or those that are being evaluated, if you will. Everybody gets to look at these and see the standards that were kind of were set. Students learn how to communicate patient instruction and education by role-playing exercise, yes. And I'll say during the remote learning, I probably have more evidence of oral communication than ever. Right? So I would have them role play, I'd have them do different activities and video themselves. So MP4 files, things like that as far as well. Yep. So there is a lot of oral communication, but sometimes, especially in the face-to-face class, it can be a little bit hard to prove unless you're recording those presentations that they're doing or having them submitted that way. And then information literacy, a lot of these are going to be more research-based and things like that. All right, so Francis has juries with professionals that come in and they have to present and defend the projects to real people. That's awesome. One other thing, I'm going to go back. One other thing too that I can think of with oral communication is like mock interviews and things like that students do for one of our senior classes. We have HR people come in and mock interview our students. So that's another example. Do you record those, Francis, by chance?
I do, but we do them. The past year and a half, we've been doing them on Zoom. And so I do recording. I leave it up for a little while, but my Zoom account doesn't have a lot of bandwidth. So I need to record it to my computer so I can save it. And then they go back and they watch themselves because they're so nervous that they
Right.
don't know what they're saying sometimes, and they don't know how they come across.
Right.
But
Well, that's a great opportunity, though. That is a great.
I don't have any. I don't keep them after
Right.
they've looked at them.
Okay. I'm just, here's me trying to think of things that we could, look at and different ideas. But I think that's a great idea for students, especially having them rewatch them and be able to reflect on how they did.
Yeah, and what I think I want to do is have them watch them and then grade themselves on the rubric that we use to grade them before they see my grade.
Yeah, that's great.
So
That's great. Getting them involved. All right. So critical thinking, like I said, in 2020, that was presented at the Learning Improvement Week Summit. And I just wanted to kind of circle back to closing the loop, which I'll talk about in a minute, and see if, as a result of that data that was given for critical thinking, is there anything that you've done? Is there something that you want to share in regards to our critical thinking evaluation?
There is one thing that I do in my class for critical thinking is trauma scenarios. I don't know how that would fit into everyone else's program, but I do ask them to think of non-routine ways of doing things, and then I have them as a class or as groups come up with answers on how to do things together. And sometimes there's no right answer. It's just them helping and getting ideas and talking with each other to kind of help each other come up with solutions.
Right. Now, is that newer, would you say, that you've added that?
No, I've had it. We just haven't done them as much, and I think we're just I'm incorporating into the classes more now. So as they get through like the fourth semester, they have more compared to like the first semester.
Right. Now, how do you feel students receive, I guess I could ask everybody this, how do you feel students perceive those critical thinking activities when you do them?
I think they enjoy them, at least in my course. Sometimes they're really excited to share their opinion because they actually did do it at their clinical site, and they're just really excited to show us how they did it. And a lot of times they're proud of their work also.
Right. I would agree. I think the only negative that I've personally seen in a similar scenario is they want a right answer, and sometimes I just can't give that because it's a complex situation. So yes. There is no right or wrong. All right. Well, this I think is going to be a topic for a future CTE presentation. So just kind of, if you haven't looked at our critical thinking general education evaluation in a bit, look at our outcomes, look what our evidence that we came up with as far as what was our data, what did it show, and see if there's something that you can change in the classroom, and let us know as a committee if you do that. So I'm going to give that pitch. Now, this is our assessment cycle. And regardless of if you're doing course level, program level, or general education level assessment, really there's definite key components that have to exist. Identify desired outcomes. So for general education, we have our 5 umbrella outcomes related to critical thinking, communication, information literacy, really quantitative literacy, and help me out here.
Isn't it global?
Global learning. Thank you. So those are our 5 different areas. At the program level, we have, as a result of this program, here's our specific program level desired outcomes. And then at a course level, we have either our current umbrella statement, which is about 2 sentences long, or our topical desired outcomes. So regardless of what level, we have our outcomes. We assess our outcomes, right? So we look at we collect those results based on what our desired outcomes are. We interpret the evidence as how our students are performing. We plan based on that evidence, and we implement change. And when we look at this cycle, and we do often, we're really good at identifying our outcomes. We can grab we can assess the outcomes and get the evidence and interpret it. But where we kind of fall short is that finishing that cycle and going and closing the loop. We can make plans, but we got to implement the change. The key is the change for closing the loop. So now that we have progressed, especially as an institution, leaps and bounds in the past several years in all areas, this is where we really are hoping to start closing that loop and using the evidence that we're interpreting and plans that we're creating to start making change. So this is what my homework is for everybody, if you will. And I hope that you do consider, based on whichever level of assessment you're at, whether it's course, whether it's program, or whether it's this general education assessment. Now that you've been presented with the details at any of those levels, what can you do in the classroom, and what can you change? And when you change it, see if it works. And sometimes things do, sometimes they don't. But if you can document change and the results of that change, we'd love to hear it as the assessment committee. We'd love for you to share your results. And this is my final pitch, which I always do, is consider resources that might help based on those assessment findings, and submit a proposal to the peer review panel, because we have $30,000 every academic year. We don't use it, we lose it. So if there's things that you can see that will be beneficial, whether it's technology, professional development, training, any resource that you can tie to these assessment findings, we are willing, ready, and able to review those applications, or those submissions, if you will. All right. Any questions, thoughts as we kind of dial down and finish out this presentation? All right, so if you would like to get involved, I'm going to pitch this. I know a couple of you are already on the subcommittee. If you'd like to get involved, the General Education Subcommittee, to help be an evaluator for that committee, please let me know. You don't have to be an assessment fellow to be a part of that subcommittee, but we are more than happy to have as much help as possible. The conversations are great. We really do. I personally really enjoy getting to hear the different perspectives across campus, and really it can be enlightening to hear the way that maybe I view things differently than others, and get that more holistic understanding. So with that being said, that's all. Thank you for taking the time this afternoon to join me and talk a little bit about our general education outcomes assessment and some of the process here on campus.
Thanks, Krysti.